As promised, we're going to take a look at some of the terms on the custom Ultrabeat sampler terms and skills document. So I did want to cover these, talk about them a little bit. We'll start with mic input, and I'm not talking about the literal place where I can't talk and use the mouse at the same time, by the way. I'm not talking about the literal place where you input the mouse. I'm talking about this initial level of volume control. Sometimes it's called trim, sometimes it's called gain, but this is the first place in the gain structure in the signal path where we can take the microphone signal and amplify it, boost it. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to set that level so that we don't turn up and hear a bunch of noise, but also so that we get a good quality signal of our voice or what have you. And so it's literally just a matter of turning that signal up. There you go. How's that for a good example? Now, you know, on this microphone, it's not super sensitive, so we're going to have to turn it up pretty loud. We actually need an additional amplifier in the signal flow, but we don't have that right now, so we're just going to have to turn it up. Phantom power on this particular device is located right here for channels 1 through 4, right here for channels 5 through 8. This is 48 volts of power that goes down the microphone cable and powers a condenser microphone. This mic in this room, the Mosier room, is a dynamic microphone, so it doesn't need phantom power. So if you hit this button, you don't quite understand what's going on, and that's okay, but it doesn't need phantom power. It's not going to hurt it. Now, some of our mics need phantom power. This mic doesn't. Some of our mics can be destroyed by phantom power, but I've got some ways to try to keep that from happening. So we've talked about it. The ribbon mics can be messed up by phantom power. So the input on this, you have to actually hit the mix button until this little dot right over here moves into trim mode, and that's how you adjust the input level there, and you can see it going up and down here. Phantom power is already on this one. If you hold it down, it will turn phantom power off. Now all that information is actually right on here. In trim mode, push equals pad, hold equals phantom power, 48V. The pad is basically, that would bring the volume down just a little bit. So if we had a loud rockin' guitar amp, we might use that. So we can pretty much ignore that in that room. That's the phantom power. That's your level check. We're just going to basically get a good clean signal. And then now let's get over to Logic and talk about sample rate and bit depth. Now, if you go into your project settings, let's take a look here. We are going to be able to get into our sample rate under audio. Now, 44.1 kilohertz, that's 44,100 samples, that's per second. And then 48,000, just a little bit better, right? And then of course you could see potentially going up to here. Now, I don't have that option, and we don't have that option on our machines, but we may have a device that records there. Frankly, for what we're doing, we don't really need to we don't need to do anything other than these two. This is the quality of CD, quality audio. This is what the standard is for video recordings, the audio that goes with film. And then some of these are just things where you can boost it up and get even more precise recordings. But I mean, our ears and our equipment, we're probably not going to be able to tell the difference, to be honest. And we're going to have to get down to here again to deliver these, and by delivery I mean making a film right here, producing a full quality audio file right there. So that's your sample rate. Now when we talk about bit depth, that's the amount of little pieces of data for each sample. So that's going to multiply that sample rate even more. So let's get into the Logic preferences. And in here, let's see. Oh, there it was, sorry. Again, can't talk and mouse at the same time. And forget where this 24-bit recording option is. And so basically this is going to max out the bit rate that we have on this particular recording interface. And that's pretty standard. So that's the number of little pieces of data for each sample that's recorded. And so by little pieces of data, computer records digital audio zeros and ones. So there you have it. We talk about latency. That is the delay in time that it takes the signal to get through the interface into the computer, back out into our eardrums, into our headphones. So that's delay. Late is right there in the word, latency. And buffer is right here. We've talked a little bit about this. The buffer is the number of samples that the computer holds in its quick memory before it uses the processor excuse me, before it uses the processor to move it over into the hard drive. So if the number is small, then the computer processor is going to have to be working extra hard. If the number is large, the processor is not going to have to work as hard, but there's going to be more latency. Now, look at that. When we select this, 48.7 milliseconds is a pretty long latency. 8.1 is actually a little bit on the long side too. Getting down to 6 milliseconds and below is not that bad. Okay, we can barely perceive that. So that's your buffer. Now we talk about the tools palette. If you know some of these things, you probably already know what's going on. Z is going to zoom me in to the selection. Well, I don't like that. Control Option is going to let me select a zoom. T brings up the tools palette. You got to check out these shortcuts. Scissors is I. Fade tool is A. Text tool, Shift T, which I don't use that much, but it's pretty simple to remember that. Now let's use what we did in our sampler project, and you could do this with, if you wanted to sample really anything. I'm just going to make it simple. Tapping T twice gets you back to the regular text tool. I'm just going to do this, and then T, and then A gets you the fade tool. So you're just going to kind of pull a little fade on the beginning and end of these. And then what we did, we bounced the region in place. Bounce in place. We could either get it from here, we could get it from up here, bounce regions in place. Same thing, or we could hit, first of all, let me get back to the tool. We could hit Control B to bounce it in place. Okay, now let's make a new software instrument track. And then let's get into I like to look at the mixer, so I actually like to keep that closed because the mixer, it feels like you're doing more stuff. I don't know, you could easy access over there, so maybe that's a better way to do it for you. But if you see the mixer, you kind of get a big picture concept of what's going on. So that's your software instrument track. This is your instrument input, so you're actually picking the software instrument from that input on the track there. That's your Ultrabeat sampler. Looking at the full view gives us the chance to see these predefined patterns, which we could play right there. My speakers aren't plugged in. I don't want feedback. And if we wanted to, let's close out that full view for just a second. Let's initialize sample. And then now we've got this no sample loaded area where we can actually drag and drop a sample into that. Double clicking that lets you rename. Lots of skills. Do you have all of them? Let us hope.